16 ноября этого года президент Украины Порошенко издал указ об объявлении следующего 2016 года годом английского языка на Украине. Еще один шаг по колонизации страны. Вы помните,
On the 16th of November, the Ukrainian president issued a decree declaring the year of 2016 as the year of the English language in Ukraine. I consider this as another step of the Ukraine colonization implementation program. You may remember my warning you numerous times before that by eradicating the Russian language, which is actually a native one for Ukraine, for the sake of the alleged Ukrainian language salvation, they were preparing the country for colonization in order to maintain English as the main state language. We should understand clearly well that never will the new bosses speak the villain's language. In other words, they will never speak Ukrainian when speaking to us, Ukrainians. On the contrary, they will get their slaves to wait on them, speaking theirs, big boss's language. That's why 2016 has been declared as the year of the English language. Consequently, the learning of that particular language in higher education institutes will be paid much attention to. The language will be studied at a great deal of different training centers. Various English language contents will be held to attract the youth. Many different films with captions in the local youth's own tongue will be broadcast. The final aim of all the measures being taken is to make us forget our culture, our national roots and national identification. These are the essential elements of the mission the West has assigned the Ukrainian top official puppets to accomplish. Disgustingly, they appear to lean over backwards, taking the measures. Is this what our people are in need of? I claim it's not, and this is not only my stance. I would say that it is a reflection of facts, which are known to be stubborn things. In order to prove my point of view, I would like to refer to some social polls carried out in order to find out public awareness concerning some most urgent issues, including the status of the Russian language. In particular, I would like to allude to the sensational poll carried out in 2014, whose main purpose was to identify languages mainly spoken, so-called native tongue identification, in European countries. According to the findings, 83% of Ukrainian respondents pointed out that it is Russian, which is their native language. In Belarus, the percentage was even greater, accounting for 92%. I believe there isn't anything too surprising about the full result, because the old Russian language originated in our land. For example, Nestor, the author of the Tales of Bygone Years, wrote it in Old Russian. I want to underline that Old Russian has always been a common language for all of us. When I was in Horitsa, I popped down to the Cossack Glory Museum and asked the guide what language the Cossacks used to write their official papers in. To the Turkish Sultan, to the Crimean Han, to the Russian Tsar, the answer was all Russian, and plenty of other evidence confirmed the fact. At this point, I would like to read out a piece of historical work by the Ukrainian Russian minor anthropologist Shafonsky. So that you understand, I would like to clarify that by Russian minor and its residents, I imply ourselves, modern Ukrainians living in Ukraine, an integral part of the big Russian civilization. So the work was entitled The Topographic and Anthropologic Description of the Chernihiv region. In geographical terms, the southern half of the territory was lying in the Chernihiv province, while its western part was in the Poltava province. The dialect spoken by the local population was Slavic Russian, and was nearly identical to the language spoken by other residents living in the rest areas of the empire, with some exception to particular sound articulation and a few words pronunciation. On the whole, Russian minor dwellers speak the same language as the rest of the country do. Indeed, the Russian language was common for all of us. In contrast to the rural population, town residents have always tended to speak Russian much more frequently than Ukrainian.
И особенно для городов. Города и Киев, и Винница, и Житомир, я уже не говорю Восток и Юг Украины, все время разговаривали на русском языке. Но не только Институт Гэллопа.
Thus, in such cities as Kiev, Vinnytsia, Zhytomyr, not to mention the ones located in the southeastern region of Ukraine, people prefer Russian to Ukrainian in their everyday lives. But it wasn't only the American Institute of Public Opinion, headed by the Gallup, whose poll results I have just referred to. Besides that foundation, there is another one, which I'm going to allude to. It is the most popular internet search engine, Google. The thing is that Google has published some data related to which language, Russian or Ukrainian, the Ukrainian internet users prefer to type their inquiries in. According to the Q data, the total number of inquiries in Russian turned out to be over 7 times as much as the number of inquiries typed in Ukrainian. To be more precise, the Russian inquiry proportion amounted to 76.4%, while the Ukrainian figure accounted for just a tenth. In the detailed version of the Google's report, containing relevant data per each region, the situation was like this. In the Rovno region, just under a third of the respondents preferred Ukrainian to Russian, whereas over 2/3 of them mainly used Russian, typing their inquiries. In other words, the people opted for what they find closer to their souls. Subconsciously, they chose Russian, the language they have dreams and learn verses by heart. Now let us look at the findings obtained by the Kyiv International Sociology Institute. Anton Gushevsky, an expert from the institute, points out that in order to achieve peace, a substantial percentage of the respondents, to be more specific 47.7%, are ready to vote for giving the Russian language the status of the second state language. When considering the significance of the number, one should take in account the total Ukrainian citizens' brainwashing via media. For example, they are made to believe that people living in the Russian Federation are their bitter enemies, that Russia is an aggressor. The idea that Ukraine can survive only if it has been associated with the European Union, but not with Russia, is being drummed into their heads as well. Speaking of vote division, depending on that region, the situation is as follows. The percentage of residents living in the eastern part of the country is 61%. The proportion of those living in the central part of the country accounts for 57%. That of those living in the western part amounts for 44%. As for the southern figure, it equals 43%. I also would like to bring your attention in on the results of another public opinion poll on the right of urgent social factors, including the people's support of the current government. Besides that political issue, there was another one related to the role of the Russian language of the Ukraine. The initiator of the social research was the Canadian government. By the reason you are going to get it a bit later, the findings of the poll are hard to be found in various sources. Needless to say that the people's support level of the government is quite low, and it isn't the main aim of our today's conversation. That's why I'm not going to dwell on it for a long time. In a nutshell, I should say it is quite down. So, coming to the point, it is the Ukrainian language residents of the western Ukraine consider as their native, their percentage ranging from 92 to 97%. That figure in Ternopil is 0. In other words, the residents of that particular city are totally Ukrainian language speakers. The language preferences spectrum in the central part looks like this. In Kyiv, the Ukrainian language figure equals 27%, while the Russian language proportion is just under a third, to be more precise, 32%. The percentage of the bilingual capital residents is as much as 40%. As you can see, the Russian language sector in the capital of Ukraine is wider than that of the Ukrainian language. I guess I should say a couple of words about myself. I was born in Kyiv. My native language is Russian, but I can speak Ukrainian without any problem at all.
32% русскоязычных, 27% украиноязычных, а двуязычных 40%. Почти идентичная ситуация в Чернигове, Кировограде, в Сумах. А на юго-востоке ситуация просто радикально меняется. Даже в таком, казалось бы, украиноязычном Херсоне, читаем, украиноязычных 11%, русскоязычных 62%, двуязычных 25%. Русскоязычных 62%. В Днепропетровске украиноязычных 8%,
Nearly identical language use-related situation can be seen in the following cities and towns: Chernihiv, Kirovograd, Sumy, not to mention the one which has been formed in the southeast, where the Russian language usage indexes are even greater. Even in such allegedly Ukrainian language speaking city as Kherson, the Ukrainian percent is just 11%. The Russian language usage degree is 62%, while the bilingual extent is equal to a quarter. In the following cities, Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporozhia, Nikolaev, Kharkov, the Ukrainian language scales has turned out to be as low as 8, 3, 10.64% respectively. 84% of the Kharkiv population pointed to Russian as their native language. Knowing all these annoying government-irritating data, let us ask ourselves, what are the English language degree issued by President for? Is it for us, ordinary residents of Ukraine, where a great number of residents prefer to speak Russian? Nothing of that kind. We should see through the decree to understand what its final aim is. It is to turn Ukraine into an enemy to Russia. This political recipe has been known for a long time. Even a not unknown Otto von Bismarck instructed the German circle of Russia's friends, so-called friends, how to ruin the Russian Empire with the help of language. A sort of similar missions is being accomplished by the current government of Ukraine, being at the service of the West. With a great sorrow I can see the bitter fruit of the domestic policy being conducted through the example of my own son. The thing is that in 1994 I split up my husband, and after the divorce our son went to his father, while the girl stayed with me. The father got a job as bank management consultant and finally translated our son into the Western, material access-oriented faith. Eventually, he split off our ethnos, belonging to neither the Russian nor Ukrainian part any longer. People like him work in the Western manner, and suddenly they will be served the West loyally. That is why Poroshenko is doing his best, converting the Ukrainian youth into a loyal to West array of tough guys. For him, it is imperative that his bosses speak English when pushing around the Ukrainian slaves. Another item from Poroshenko's must be done, by all means list, is to set us the loggerheads with Russia. This agenda Poroshenko is trying to implement isn't new at all. For instance, back in 1912, they set out to publish some journals, and it wasn't, the number wasn't one. There were some others, such as Gramada, Snova, edited and published by Kulish. At that time, should be considered as the outset of the mission of developing another language different from Russian, being a mix of Russian and Polish. When the discussion related to the key point that there should be Ukrainians as another ethnic group speaking another language different from Russian was initiated, those ideas of the Ukrainian ethnic self-identification were clearly brought out in the Osnova journal. One of the articles expressed the following: if you consider yourself as Ukrainian, you should realize fully that you have nothing to do with the Russians. They are enemies for you. You have everything you need to realize you are self-sufficient in ethnic identification terms. You have your own land and your own language. It is outrageous lie. It is a pack of lies, because we, Ukrainians and Russians, share the same land where Kiev Rus was originated, which in turn became the foundation of our common ethnos. We also share the same language, the time called the Old Russian language. Of course, the language went through a number of transformations as it evolved, but we should remember that the modern Russian language was formed approximately in the 17th century, while the Ukrainian language emerged at the turn of the 20th century. But we mustn't lose the most essential the two branches of the Russian ethnos have. We should guard that color we have like the apple of our eyes. Otherwise we will lose our culture and language. We will betray our orthodox faith, uniting us, because we give in to the temptation of the false self-identification. We will be happy to swallow such baits as Catholicism, Protestantism, Unitism, anything to reject our authentic common past. What shall we do then? Happily, people are resisting. They don't want to betray themselves.
Я хочу еще продемонстрировать это на результатах соцопроса, который ежегодно проводит Институт социологии Академии наук Украины. В этих соцопросах, вот я беру первый том «Украинские суспільства», это издание Института социологии Академии наук Украины, статью Тягло, кандидата социологических наук, где он показывает, какую же какой же язык считают необходимым сделать обязательным для изучения на Украине. И
At
вот на
this
странице
point,
505
I would like to support my words
что
by relevant facts.
на
Findings of a
южном регионе
sociological
61%
poll carried
опрошенных
out
считают
annually by the
русский язык.
Institute of Sociology of the
В восточном
Ukrainian
регионе
Academy of Sciences. In particular, I'm going to refer to an article written by
В Донбассе
Taglov.
82
The work
и
reveals people's
0,1%
opinions on
считают
two urgent
русский
questions.
язык.
Question 1. Learning of which
Киеве
language should be
меньше,
obligatory
в
at
Виннице
school?
меньше, на Западе еще меньше. Ну, так что?
61% of southern region
Но
residents
это же
pointed to Russian.
наша
In the eastern part of the
страна,
country, the
это
figure
наше
stood at
государство.
71.6%.
Юг,
In
Восток,
Donbass, the Russian language
Донбасс.
percentage was even greater,
И что,
being equal
наплевать на
to
всех?
82.1%. The
Считают
farther
учить нужно
from the
русский.
southeast
А им говорят, нет,
through the country towards the west,
русский
the
вообще
lower the Russian
вытравят
language
из
index.
школ.
So what?
Вообще,
Should
чтобы
we
дети
ignore
забыли
those
русскую
citizens of our
грамоту.
country who want their
Английский
offspring
будут
to learn
учить.
Russian?
На английском
When they
разговаривать.
express their
Дальше
expectations and
этот же
aspirations, the
ученый,
authorities
пишет
replies,
в этой же
no,
работе
your children will not
результаты
learn Russian.
опроса,
We shall learn the
как вы
kid
относитесь
language.
к
It will
тому,
not be
чтобы
taught at school.
в Украине
Instead,
существует
Ukrainian peoples will learn English.
Украино-российское
The other
двуязычие.
question included
Вообще
in
это
the sociological
большое счастье.
questionnaire was the
Это
following.
поднимает
What's
наш
your
народ
attitude to
над
the
многими другими народами
bilingualism
мира.
existing in Ukraine?
Двуязычие.
Before I
Два
announce the
языка
results of the
знать.
poll, I would like to
Так
emphasize how great it is that we,
обязательно, то есть
residents
позитивно
of
к этому
Ukraine, can
относятся,
boast
чтобы
of being able to speak
Украина
two languages,
русская была
Ukrainian
двуязычие.
and Russian.
Относятся к
That
этому
brings up
позитивно.
at a high level in comparison with mono-ethnic states
25%
that broadens our minds and enriches
негативно,
our own culture.
Другие там
Coming back to our
колеблются
sheet,
условно и так
the
далее.
percentage of those who are
25
for
и 19.
bilingualism is 25%.
Это мнение
Those who are
народа
against is
Украины.
19%.
И еще один
The rest
интересный
respondents
момент,
hesitated.
очень интересный. Когда проводили опрос, вот этот мониторинг Института социологии, задавали, там же по-разному задавали вопросы. И вот задавали вопросы. Это я беру второй том этого же сборника, второй том, страница 52. По отношению к каждой национальности, которая приведена ниже, выберите одно из положений, наиболее близкое лично вам, куда бы вы допустили представителей этой национальности. И тут по каждому вопросу дается много подсказок. Вот представителя этой национальности я бы хотел видеть. Смотрите, какие подсказы. Членам моей семьи, близких друзей, соседей, коллег по работе, жителей Украины, посетителей Украины, вообще бы не пускал бы в Украину. Ну и есть, которые не ответили. Так вот, и тут по самым разным национальностям. Азербайджанцы, американцы, арабы, афганцы, белорусы, венгры, грузины и так далее, и так далее. Я 3 возьму. Ключевые для нас интересные национальности. По американцам. Наше население. Ну, как
The
бы оно
second volume
захотело
of the same
в качестве
sociological edition of the
посетителей
Ukrainian
Украины,
Academy of
безусловно.
Sciences
Вообще
contains
открытые,
findings
доброжелательные.
on the
Поэтому
matter of
посетителей
Ukrainians'
Украины
attitude to
по каждой
representatives of other
национальности
ethnic
очень большое
groups.
количество.
They were
Это
offered to pick up a feature or an
Пожалуйста, пусть
opinion
приезжают,
best
смотрят на нашу
characterizing
страну.
their
Но я не
perception
считаю вот
of
этого
other
подсказа
nations. For example, they were offered the following options to choose from.
А кроме
Option A.
в
I would
качестве
like to
кого
see them
самое
as
большое
members of
число?
my family.
И
Option
здесь
B.
написано.
I would like to see them as my
Коллег
close
по
friends. Option C. I would like to see them as my neighbors. Option D. I would like to see them as my colleagues. Option E. I would like to see them as residents of Ukraine. Option F. I would like to see them as visitors to my country. And G. I wouldn't let them enter the state border. Among many nationals started, I would like to pick up 3 playing the most essential role in our lives: Belarus, the USA, and Russia. As for Americans, Ukrainian respondents expressed their desire to see them as their colleagues, the percentage being equal to 9.8%. However, Ukrainians didn't turn out to see Americans either as their close friends or as the members of their families. Yes, I should admit that Americans are a bit more well-informed. They have available work experience. We would like them to share with us, but nothing more than that. I find it very significant. As for Belarus, the picture is quite different. 17.5% of the respondents would like to see Belarusians as residents of Ukraine, the share being the largest. Can you beat it? Not just visitors, but residents. 17.2% of the respondents want to see them as neighbors, and finally 17% would like to have them as friends. As for Russia, the figures are different from the American ones as well. 18.7% of the respondents would like to have Russians as members of their families. For example, my sister married a Moscow resident, a typical Russian man. Now my 3 nephews live in Moscow. They are my flesh and blood. And the number of people like me who have become related with Russians is enormous. The most intriguing part of the survey is that it was conducted in June 2014.
Это уже тогда, когда бесновался полгода до этого Евромайдан, где неонацисты орали москалей на ножи, где они скабрезным образом оскорбляли президента великой страны Путина.
When the militant youngsters were jumping, chanting, Moscow should be slaughtered by knives. When they were wearing the Nazi symbols, when they were inciting president of a great country, Putin, they even didn't take pains to guise their real nature. They didn't conceal the fact that they hated all except themselves, Ukrainians. In particular, they loathed Russians. I watched others claiming they were real patriots of Ukraine. It is a bullshit. Guys, repent your sins on Maidan, beating your hands against the ground. You are paving the way not for Ukrainians, but for Americans. In this case, you should change your slogans. You like showing in some TV channels, such as the Fifth and the First TV channels. Instead of the words Ukraine is for Ukrainians, you should have written Ukraine is for Americans. That's why Poroshenko has issued the decree. But I really do believe that it isn't that easy to fool us around. Ukrainian residents. I also believe that in each family, parents and grandparents will continue to teach their offspring the Russian language, which is native for all of us, both Ukrainians and Russians. They will keep on implanting love to both Russian and Ukrainian. As for learning other languages, English, Spanish, German, French, and others, well, I'm not retrograde. On the contrary, I call upon you learning any language you like, but I want you to bear in mind that by no means should you betray your country. And what is more important, you shouldn't betray your ethnos and the faith of our fathers and grandfathers, because if you do this, that will be the deepest sin of yours, and you will hardly ever be absolved.
Если его совершить, прощения не будет.